The air in the Pine Ridge cabin felt thinner than usual that November afternoon. Cold seeped in from the cracked edges of the windows, and a low wind sighed through the tall pine trees outside like the ghost of a memory Jess had spent years trying to forget. She stood alone in the middle of the kitchen, wood-paneled walls surrounding her like the ribcage of something long dead, clutching a letter so brief, so blunt, that it seemed almost absurd it could hurt as badly as it did. "Don't come home for Thanksgiving." Just 5 words, typed in the body of an email from her father. No salutation, no explanation, no kindness. "My name is Jessica Carter. Jess to the few who ever got close enough to call me that. I'm a veteran, a former Army Sergeant First Class, and I've survived some of the hardest things a person can go through. I've patrolled villages where children cried not because they were scared of us, but because they didn't want to be seen talking to us. I've lost fellow soldiers to IEDs, and I've carried the unbearable guilt of surviving when they didn't. I've stitched wounds with trembling fingers, and I've heard the last words of a friend echo in my mind every single night since 2012. But nothing, had ever prepared me for the feeling I had as I stared at that sentence from my own father. It wasn't just rejection. It was abandonment. Cold and calculated. For years I'd tried to earn my place in this family. I'd called during deployments to say happy birthday to my mom, even when I was half the world away. I'd wired money to help them cover bills, even when my own account balance teetered just above empty. I'd bought gifts I never saw opened. I flew home on holidays like a dutiful daughter, smiled at awkward dinners, helped clean the cabin like I belonged there. But I never really did. My father was the strong, silent type, but not the noble kind you read about in books. He was cold, distant, and looked at emotions like weaknesses. My mother was quieter still. Not from coldness, I don't think, but from fear. She hovered on the edge of everything, never standing up for me, never stepping in when Dad's words cut too deep. And then there was Logan, my younger brother, golden child, football star turned insurance agent. Dad's twin in posture and silence. He didn't hate me, but he sure didn't see me. Not really. Even when I came back from the war, when I had metal in my hip, a ribbon on my chest, and a medical discharge under my belt, they still looked at me like the same moody teenager who left home at 18 with a duffel bag and something to prove. And maybe I did have something to prove back then. But I didn't anymore. Still, that didn't stop the sting of reading that line. "Don't come home for Thanksgiving." No reason. No apology. Just an unspoken message behind the message. You are not wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there in the cabin, my own little mountain retreat I'd rented for the season to avoid awkward family dinners, and whispered one word. Fine. That night I opened my laptop and canceled the flight I'd booked weeks earlier. $420 non-refundable. A small price to pay for my sanity. I poured a glass of wine, the good kind I'd been saving for the holiday, and sat on the old rocking chair on the back porch. The mountains stretched before me like folded arms, embracing nothing. I stared at the distant lights of Pine Ridge twinkling down the valley. Families preparing turkeys, stringing lights, laughing around fires. They didn't want me, and maybe they never had. It was sobering in a way even combat hadn't been. That night I wrote no emails, sent no texts. I didn't respond to my dad's message except for the word I'd typed quickly before shutting my phone off. Fine. It was more than agreement. It was an act of surrender, but not in the way he might have expected. It was me giving up on the hope that one day I'd be welcomed back with open arms. That one day I'd matter to the people I loved most. I couldn't make them see me. I couldn't make them want me. But I could walk away before it broke me any further. The wind howled that night, bending trees and rattling loose shingles. But inside I felt something shift. A stillness. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. The kind that only comes when you finally let go of something that's been weighing you down for far too long. Little did I know 5 days later everything would change. Not because they reached out. Not because they apologized. But because of a single email attachment I'd long forgotten existed. Buried in an old inbox like a ticking bomb waiting to go off. And when it did, it didn't just shake my world. It handed me the keys to theirs. The wind outside the cabin had settled by morning, but inside me, something else had started to stir. A quiet numbness, like I'd left something behind and couldn't remember what. I made coffee in the tin kettle that sat lopsided on the old stovetop, watching the steam curl in lazy spirals. I hadn't spoken a word out loud since reading my father's message the night before. Not a word to anyone. There was something oddly liberating about silence, especially the kind that follows heartbreak. It made you hyper-aware of things. The creak of the floorboards, the ticking of the wall clock, the hiss of snow melting off the porch roof. But underneath all that quiet was something louder than I wanted to admit. A question I couldn't shake. Why no? Why had he sent that message? What was the tipping point? I hadn't done anything this time, not recently anyway. It was always like this with him. No build-up. No reason. Just exile. And the more I thought about it, the more it scratched at something deeper, something that didn't feel right. So I opened my laptop. Not to email him, God no, but to pull up old documents. Maybe I was trying to distract myself. Maybe I was just chasing something that would make sense in a world that suddenly didn't. I scrolled through years of dusty digital folders labeled Army Leave, Loan Docs, Medical, and even one called Carter Cabin that I barely remembered creating. That's where I found it. A PDF dated March 2010. PDF. I almost closed it. I assumed it was the standard paperwork Dad made me sign all those years ago when I was home on a short leave. He'd caught me as I was passing through, said the bank needed a second signature to finalize a refinance deal on the cabin. I was exhausted from back-to-back deployments and had only 2 days left before flying out. I didn't ask many questions. I signed what he handed me. Just wanted to help. Just wanted to sleep. But this time I opened it. And everything changed. The language was dense, like most mortgage paperwork. I skimmed until I hit the part that caught my breath. In the absence of specific designation, ownership of the secured property shall default to a 51/49 interest ratio in favor of the primary signatory bearing the most recent date and full legal signature. I blinked. Scrolled down. There was. Signature 1. William Carter. Dated March 18, 2010. Signature 2. Jessica Carter. Dated March 19, 2010 with full rank and SSN. He signed first. I signed last. My fingers hovered over the trackpad as if touching it too hard would break the spell. I clicked back to the top of the document, rereading every line more slowly this time. There was no clause limiting me to co-signer status. No clause stating he retained full ownership. Just one poorly worded assumption, and a timeline that placed me in control. 51%. I owned the majority of the property. My heart slammed in my chest, not with joy but with disbelief. I could feel the heat flush to my cheeks as the weight of it hit me. The cabin wasn't just the place I grew up. It wasn't just the site of every distant family holiday, or where my father had built walls taller than the logs that framed the house. It was a real, tangible asset. A part of my life I had assumed I had no claim to, no voice in. And now, I legally had control of it. The implications came fast and sharp. The cabin was in my name. If Dad wanted me gone, if he thought cutting me out of Thanksgiving was a way of exerting power, he had no idea what he was up against. He had underestimated me, not just as a daughter but as a woman who had spent the better part of 2 decades surviving war zones, rebuilding lives and fighting for dignity in a world that rarely offered it freely. I sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour, reading and rereading the document until I knew every line by heart. Then slowly I started making calls. First to a real estate attorney I'd met through a fellow veteran back in Denver. Her name was Monica. She listened carefully, asked questions I barely had the emotional energy to answer and then said calmly, "Jessica, you're not wrong. You're the majority stakeholder. Legally, you have leverage. More than that, you have options." Those words echoed through me like a spark lighting dry brush. Next, I emailed myself a backup copy of the mortgage PDF. Then I wrote a letter, typed slowly, carefully, making sure every line was clear. To William Carter, Margaret Carter, Logan Carter. Subject: Property rights and future discussion. In 2010, I co-signed the second mortgage on the Pine Ridge cabin. Recent review of the terms has confirmed that I hold a 51% ownership stake in the property. I am exercising my rights as majority owner. All further conversations regarding the use, residency, and maintenance of the property will go through me directly. No intermediaries. No assumptions. Please expect formal documentation by mail within the next week. SFC Jessica Carter, Ret. Co-owner. I printed it, sealed it, sent it certified. And for the first time in years I felt something new. Clarity. Not rage. Not revenge. Just the quiet, unstoppable certainty that comes when truth finally outweighs trauma. What had started as rejection had become revelation. And what they thought was a goodbye. It was only the beginning. Thanksgiving morning dawned like a quiet betrayal. Snow dusted the pines outside the Telluride Lodge, softening the sharp edges of the world. I stood at the window with a mug of black coffee, watching white flurries drift down like ashes from a fire that had burned out long ago. No smell of turkey in the oven. No half-hearted conversations. No pretending. Just stillness, and for the first time in years that stillness didn't feel lonely. It felt intentional. I'd driven myself here 2 days earlier after mailing the certified letter. The retreat wasn't fancy, just a small log house tucked at the end of a gravel road on the edge of the forest. But it was mine for the weekend. No family. No tension. Just me, a fireplace, a bottle of bourbon, and silence. I turned off my phone. Not just silent mode. Off. If they wanted to reach me, they could wait. I needed space to think, to let the shock of what I'd uncovered settle into something I could live with. Because while the legal document had given me power, it also handed me responsibility. I hadn't just been rejected. I'd been blindsided into reclaiming something I hadn't even realized I owned. And now, what did I do with that? Do I force them out? Do I sell the house? Do I go back into that place, that physical space where I was never enough, and somehow assert myself as more? For years I'd fought to be seen. Now I was finally holding something they couldn't deny. And yet it didn't feel like triumph. It felt like standing on a frozen lake, knowing one wrong step could send everything cracking. By the second day, the silence was interrupted. My phone, powered on just to check the weather, erupted with missed calls. My mom. My brother. Even Dad once. And then the lawyer. Yes, their lawyer, whose number I recognized from a single voicemail. Jessica, this is Mark Fulton representing your father. We received your certified letter. There are questions. Please call back. I didn't. But I listened to every voicemail, sitting by the fireplace with a pen in hand taking notes. Logan's voice was shaky. Jess, what the hell is going on? Dad's freaking out, Mom's crying, the lawyer says you're serious. You didn't even warn us. Talk to me, please. I could almost picture him, sitting in Dad's old recliner, bouncing his leg, trying to be the peacemaker. The loyal son. The one who always did what was expected. Just like I used to. My mother's message was quieter. Slower. A small voice asking for mercy. Jessica, sweetheart. I know things have been tense. But this is too much. Your father's not well. Can't we talk this through? You don't need to do this. But I did. That was the truth I kept returning to every time my gut clenched at the sound of their voices. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I wasn't doing this to teach anyone a lesson. I was doing this to finally set boundaries. All my life I had played the good soldier. I gave when they didn't ask. I stayed silent when I should have screamed. I showed up when I wasn't welcome and kept hoping someone, anyone, would say, I'm proud of you. And when they didn't, I doubled down on proving my worth. But what if it was never about me being worthy? What if it was just them? I spent the next day drafting another letter. Not to them. Not yet. But to myself. A kind of emotional mission plan. I wrote down what I needed from the situation. Not revenge, but clarity. I wanted transparency on what they had done with the cabin, whether it was being rented or remodeled without my knowledge. I wanted legal acknowledgement of my stake. And most importantly, I wanted my voice to be heard. When I turned my phone back on that night, there was a new voicemail, from the lawyer again, more firm this time. Ms. Carter, the cabin has been under rental agreements for the last 3 years. If you plan to act on your legal stake, we will need to meet and discuss the terms. Your father is not interested in conflict. I hope you'll extend the same courtesy. Rental agreements. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. So it was true. They'd turned the house into a side hustle. While telling me not to come home, they'd been subletting the very floors I helped pay for. Cash flow, income streams. Off my name, my signature, my blind trust. That's when I stopped hesitating. I called Monica, my attorney, and forwarded the voicemail. Within hours, we had drafted a second letter. This time it wasn't a conversation starter. It was a declaration. Effective January 2nd, I would be entering the property with a licensed property manager. Any occupancy not explicitly cleared by me would be considered unlawful. If they wished to remain, a lease agreement would be required. No exceptions. I signed it not just as Jessica Carter, but as SFC Jessica Carter, U.S. Army Ret. I mailed it the next morning, along with a copy of the original mortgage document, notarized and time-stamped. For once I wasn't just reacting. I was commanding, strategizing, moving first. And yet, even with that strength in my hands, there was still a part of me, the daughter part, that hoped someone would call and say, "Jess, we're sorry." They didn't. By Christmas Eve the snow had thickened and my phone was silent. I lit a small candle on the porch of the lodge and watched it flicker in the mountain wind. Not for them. Not even for me. For the version of me that used to stand outside their house, waiting for the door to open. She was gone now. And in her place stood a woman who had finally learned how to open her own. January 2nd arrived cloaked in a heavy gray sky, the kind that makes everything feel heavier, like even the clouds are bracing for confrontation. I pulled into the long gravel drive leading to the Pine Ridge cabin just after sunrise. The tires of my rental truck crunched slowly over frozen mud, echoing a sound I'd known since childhood but now carried an entirely different weight. The cabin stood there, unmoved, almost daring me to cross the threshold. Beside me sat Marcus, my property manager, a Marine veteran turned contractor with a clipboard, a thermal vest, and zero tolerance for bullshit. He didn't talk much, but I appreciated his quiet presence. When I'd hired him, he didn't ask questions, just read the documents, nodded once, and said, "Let's get you your house back." In the back of the truck was a locksmith, legally cleared to change every lock on the property. I had all my documentation in a folder. Mortgage agreement, ownership verification, certified letters sent to my parents, and a formal property inspection order. Monica, my attorney, had insisted I carry everything physically. It felt like walking into a standoff, but this time I wasn't walking in unarmed. As we approached the front porch, I noticed the porch light was still on. A string of old Christmas lights drooped half-heartedly along the eaves, blinking in chaotic rhythm. It felt like a metaphor, flashing remnants of a holiday I wasn't invited to. Then the door opened. My father stood there in jeans and a flannel shirt, his posture straight as ever, his mouth pulled into a hard line. He didn't speak right away, just stared as if trying to summon a version of me that no longer existed. Behind him, my mother hovered in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself like armor. Her eyes found mine, and for a second I thought I saw something flicker there. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion. I stepped forward, calm but steady. "I'm here under legal authority. As of today, I'm inspecting the property and changing the locks. If you choose to stay, you'll need to sign a formal lease. Otherwise, you have 30 days to vacate." His voice cracked the silence like a branch breaking under snow. "This is my house, Jessica." "No," I replied evenly. "It's ours. And legally, it's more mine than yours." He stepped onto the porch, face reddening. "We built this with our own hands. We raised you here." I didn't flinch. "And you shut me out of it." The silence that followed was raw and jagged. My mother stepped forward, her voice softer. "Where will we go?" I looked at her and something in me twisted. Not out of hate. Not even out of anger anymore. Just a deep, unhealed sadness. "Maybe not home for Christmas," I said. "Like you told me." She blinked and I watched her mouth close on words she didn't say. Marcus moved past me into the house with a quiet nod, beginning his assessment. He took photos, examined wiring, made notes about the foundation and insulation. After 20 minutes he turned to me and shook his head. "You're not going to like this." I followed him into the basement, my old hiding spot as a teenager. It was barely recognizable. Mold crept along the corners of the drywall. A sagging mattress lay on the floor, covered in blankets. A makeshift kitchenette had been installed, barely legal. Tenants. Unlisted. No contracts. Renters paying in cash, occupying my legal property while I was being told not to show up for the holidays. Marcus showed me receipts he'd pulled from drawers upstairs, notes of cash paid on torn pieces of notebook paper. Names scribbled without addresses. It was a quiet hustle. A betrayal. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. They hadn't just shut me out emotionally, they'd used me. My name, my signature, my trust. And they'd turned that into money while pretending I didn't exist. At the top of the stairs I looked at my parents. "This ends now," I said. I handed them a folder with the lease terms, a schedule for repairs, and a formal notice to vacate if they chose not to cooperate. My father didn't even open it. He turned, walked into the back room and shut the door. That was it. No fight. No apology. Just silence. By the end of January they were gone. No goodbye. No final confrontation. Just an empty cabin, keys left in a paper envelope on the front porch. The quiet kind of departure that leaves more questions than closure. But I didn't let the silence haunt me. Over the next few months I worked with Marcus and a team of volunteers, most of them veterans like me, to rebuild. We gutted the basement, cleaned out the rot, rewired everything. We built bunk-style bedrooms, installed a new kitchen, added security. We turned it into something new. The Carter House. A transitional shelter for female veterans struggling with reintegration, just like I once was. Women with nowhere to go. Women told they didn't belong. Women dismissed, overlooked, erased. I gave them my old room. On opening day we held a quiet ceremony. No press. No speeches. Just a ribbon, a few candles, and 6 women walking through the door with bags on their backs and hope in their eyes. That night, as snow began to fall again, I lit a single candle on the porch. A tradition now. Not for my parents. Not even for the broken version of me that once stood out there in the cold. It was for the survivor. For the woman who walked away from silence and claimed her voice, her space, her home. And for the women who would follow. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Your support means everything. If this story touched you or made you think, please subscribe to our channel for more real, powerful stories.